bringing you in-depth discussion from one of the rad groups of online writers covering the Edmonton Oilers. Are you ready for Oilers Overtime? Join us as we talk news, rumors, trades, player grades, game results, and more. All featured on one of the most glorified teams in the NHL. From the great one to the next one. From the boys on the bus to the decade of darkness. This is Oilers Overtime.
Welcome, everybody. We're back with THW Oilers Overtime. We used to do this show regularly during last regular season. Took a little break for the summer, but we're back and we're going to be doing it again with the NHL 2022-23 season upon us. So Colton Pankiw is with us. We're going to maybe see if somebody else from our Oilers crew at the Hockey Writers is interested in joining us for next week. But for the time being, it's the two of us. Colton, how are you?
Good, Jim. Like you said, I'm not sure, a little break, felt like forever. I haven't been on one of these for a long time, so good to be back.
Well, the funny thing is that it was a little break in terms of what we normally would expect from the Oilers, right? Because typically they're not going very far in the playoffs, so the off season is longer, the golf season's longer, and we talk more about other teams, but they went pretty far. They went all the way to the Western Conference Finals last year, and the expectations on the team for this season are even greater, which is going to be interesting because I'm not sure, unless you're right in the final or you win the whole thing, how you get a whole lot better than being in the Western Conference Finals. So let's talk about that today. We're going to be dealing mostly with our early predictions and projections for the season, the expectations that are on this team, how they did in the offseason compared to how we think we'll do, or the Oilers will do this year. So where do you want to start? Do you want to talk real general about what we believe the Oilers are going to do this year, or do you want to talk specifically players, offseason moves? Where do you want to go? I'll let you decide.
I think we can talk about where kind of the team projects first. I think that's kind of what everyone's wanting to hear right now with the season starting.
Okay. Well, most experts have the Oilers, playing extremely well. Some insiders actually have predicted the Oilers to win the Stanley Cup. We, among the Hockey Writers writers, and there's quite a few of us, did our projections as well. And a lot of the writers here had Carolina and Edmonton going back to the final from 2006, many thinking that perhaps the Oilers have a shot at winning this whole thing. I, full disclosure, picked Carolina and Colorado, but I did think about it. I almost put the Oilers in there. I just didn't want to seem like that guy that was too homerish when I was like, oh, well, it's the Oilers, Oilers all the way. But where do you have them finishing? Do you think that they can actually go farther than they did last season and get past the Western Conference Finals?
Do I think they could? Yes. That said, I don't think they're maybe the deepest team in the West. I think Colorado's still kind of the team to beat. I think Oilers fans don't want to hear this, but I think the Flames did get better at their offseason moves, assuming that they're able to gel now, because obviously they had a lot of turnover. But yeah, I mean, I think definitely with McDavid and Draisaitl, I think anything's possible. And you've seen what those two were able to do in the playoffs last season. And I think getting that goalie in Campbell, I think kind of helps them out. So whether or not, like you said, it's hard to kind of replicate or be better than last season when they made the conference finals. But I expect them to be really competitive again. I think that they will win the Pacific Division this year. And then, as we know, anything can happen in the playoffs.
Okay, so let me ask you this. If the Oilers if they have a disappointing season, where does that leave them? So if you're saying, okay, yeah, we have to look back at this year when it's all over and go, man, that was not what we wanted. What's disappointing? Now, there's being a lottery team and there's being whatever, not making the playoffs. We assume that they're going to do that. But what would you still believe is kind of disappointing for the Oilers if you look back at the year and said, yeah, that didn't go quite as we'd planned?
Yeah, I think it all comes down, I don't want to say that the conference final against Colorado was a disappointment, even though the sweep was, I know everyone was hoping it would go better. I think it was they just ran into a good team. That said, I think at least second round again, right? And again, playoffs are just so hard to predict because anything can happen. I think Oilers fans truly are at the point now where they think anything less than a Stanley Cup is somewhat disappointing, which is a great place to be as a team, considering where this team was for over a decade there when they were that lottery team year after year. So I think, again, personally, I'm hoping at least I'm hoping for a Stanley Cup, a conference final at the bare minimum. But that said, again, if they somehow get matched up against a Colorado or someone in the second round, it's tough to say what can happen.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because I know a lot of people are saying if they don't get past the first round of the playoffs, that would be a huge disappointment. That's for sure. I also believe people are saying that, but really deep down inside, they're going, no, they need to get back to the Western Conference Finals. Anything less than that would probably be a disappointment. So having said that, in what would be a positive for you? Now, obviously, Oilers fans want them to win the Stanley Cup. Every fan in every area that they cheer for wants their team to win the Stanley Cup. Some know that those expectations aren't realistic, and some believe that they are. Would it still be a success if the Oilers got into the Western Conference Finals and just were more competitive? Or do you believe they need to win that series to really go, okay, yeah, this was a good season for us?
Yeah, I mean, again, like it's tough because it's tough to say the Western Conference Final is disappointing, but like you had McDavid, Draisaitl in the primes of their career. The good thing is they still have additional years, so I think that's kind of the one thing that I'm holding on hope with. Like if they're entering kind of the last and second last year of their contract and are losing in the conference final again, then it's extra disappointing. That said, like I truly do believe that they are good enough if they play their best to make the cup final. So like you said, I think at least a conference final, and then hopefully you just kind of hope that they can perform a bit better than they did at that stage last year. I know they're dealing with injuries and everything, but I think that sweep, if that were to happen again, would be pretty demoralizing.
Yeah, that sweep is what will get people, right? Like everybody understood last season that you come up against the Colorado Avalanche, who were the favorites to win it all. They're the team to beat. Even Daryl Sutter from Calgary is like, if you get them in the opening round, you're just wasting your time. Like there's no way you're winning that series, right? So people expected that Colorado would go on and probably win the whole thing, which they did. But to beat the Oilers in 4 and somewhat handily, that was a little bit of a disappointment for Oilers fans. They just don't want to see that again, right? So if that were to happen and you had a rematch, I think people would be okay with it if the Oilers won 2, 3 of those games, even if they ended up losing. But obviously, Colorado maybe has taken a little bit of a step backwards. No Nazem Kadri, some changes in goal. The Oilers have some changes too, but I don't see any real huge step backwards for Edmonton. I don't know that people would look at Duncan Keith's retirement and go, oh my gosh, that's a huge difference maker. I think they'll notice it, but I don't know that they'll actually go, man, we needed him to get through that series. The goaltending will be the question, right? Is Jack Campbell that much better than everybody else? Let's talk a little bit about that as we switch gears and talk specifically about some of the positions and the areas of strength or weakness. You had written an article on the Hockey Writers about how, I can't remember exactly who it was, maybe The Athletic or something, had said that the Oilers goaltending is weaker this year than it was last year. I suppose you can make that argument based on the stats that Mike Smith and Mikko Koskinen put up, but a lot of people think the goaltending has taken a huge step forward with Jack Campbell and Stuart Skinner. Where do you fall on that article, and what's your opinion of their goaltending this year?
Yeah, to me, I personally don't think it's all that close. Like I was never a huge Mikko Koskinen fan. His first 2 seasons, I was fine with him, and after that, it was a bit of a roller coaster. I think that Stuart Skinner is like a significant upgrade in the backup role. As far as Smith, like we talked about on the show a ton, there was the highs and the lows, and they were very, like, it was just crazy with him. You never knew what you were going to get. When he was on, he was fantastic. And then, like we've seen in the playoffs last year, like a couple of those games against the Flames and then against Colorado, he was just, I don't know, there just didn't seem to be much left in the tank. So I do think Campbell is an upgrade over that. I'm not still, like, there are questions, I think, consistency and everything. He doesn't have a really lengthy track record as a starter. So I don't think he's an elite goalie by any means, but at the same time, like, I don't think this Oilers team needs that. Like, they can put up goals in bunches. I think they need a guy that's just going to be able to stop the pucks he should, which they weren't getting from Smith at times, and those goals can just crush teams. So I think that Campbell will help a lot in that regard. And then I think Skinner will be able to come in and kind of give support to if Campbell does kind of find some inconsistencies or just need some time off. I think Skinner's a more reliable option than Koskinen to come in and fill in that backup role.
Yeah, you're right. Skinner's not proven, but he has looked good so far the preseason. He has been a player that fans have actively, and especially if you talk to Brian Swain, who used to be on the show all the time, he's a big Stuart Skinner advocate, that he's just been waiting. He's just been ready to go, that this is an opportunity. I think this is perfect timing for him. He absolutely needs to come in and show that he is what everybody thinks he's going to be. And he has been solid in the preseason so far. I'm looking forward to it. And if he can handle 25 to 30 games, I think that's a good spot to be in, because that puts, Jack Campbell somewhere around the 50 to 55 range, which is kind of ideal. You don't want him doing a whole lot more than that. I'm with you. I think it's an upgrade. I believe that Mike Smith and Koskinen were a decent pair. I think the criticism they got sometimes was unfair, but you're right. They gave in a lot of softies when they should have been making saves. They just didn't. And Koskinen had that, there was a mental part of his game. When he let in 1 or 2 bad ones, it was like the floodgates had opened. I don't think we're going to see that so much with Campbell and Skinner. So that could be a really solid sign. What about the defense? There may be the one area, if there's a question mark. I mean, the question mark in goals there because of the inexperience, and we just are learning about Jack Campbell here in Edmonton. But what about the blue line? Do you think it's better, worse, ready to go? Will they need to make an upgrade? Where do you see this blue line sitting at?
I think it's tough for me to say it's better right now, but I think it kind of depends on like the step that Evan Bouchard is able to take forward. Like I know they're planning on him kind of filling out. He's still only 22, so there's a lot of room for growth there. And yeah, I think I like Kulak on that second pairing. I think that he looked really good with the Oilers. That said, it was a short time, so can he do it over the full season? But overall, I do think it's maybe slightly better than last year. As far as an upgrade, I do think that's the one area that I would like to see them add to. I know they have literally no cap room right now, but if Holland's able to do something, I know Chikrin's still available in Arizona. I know it kind of sounds like that might not be a fit for the Oilers, but adding someone on that either left or right side, I think ahead of the playoffs is a huge need for them.
Yeah, I think they will add something. I am a little concerned. I know his underlying numbers are really good. He played extremely well for the Oilers when he was acquired by the Montreal Canadiens. I have a slight concern with Brett Kulak and whether or not he can handle second pairing minutes on a regular basis. He's yet to really have to do it. And the Oilers are really counting on it. If something were to happen to Darnell Nurse, and he battled some injuries last year, now all of a sudden Kulak's your number one left side defenseman. That's a big ask. Like that's a huge responsibility on someone who's never had to been elevated into that role before. And he hasn't actually done it second pairing either. So you're kind of hoping that this all works out. The numbers suggest that in a larger sample, it should be okay. But then you've got rookies behind him, Philip Broberg, Marcus Niemelainen, things like that, right? You got Ryan Murray on the roster tonight as they open up against the Vancouver Canucks. But it's a question mark there, right? If Ryan Murray plays well, maybe this isn't such a huge issue. But Ryan Murray has been kind of injury riddled.
Yeah, a lot of injury concerns there too. So.
Right. So it's hard to be consistent and reliable on a guy who's never been able to kind of stick with it and be there. So I think there's question marks there for sure. I think they will need to upgrade at some point. And you're right. The cap issue is a concern because they have like $0, $167 or something like that in which to spend money on a defenseman. Now, I also expect there will be an injury or two. I wrote an article today about whether or not this shortened roster can withstand injuries, which are inevitable every year. When that happens and you've got LTIR, then you can go make a move, but they've maxed out LTIR. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens there. What about the forwards? This is the real area of strength that everybody looks at for the Oilers, right? Like their top six is incredible. Their top nine looks pretty decent. Even their fourth line's got some experience on it. Are they maybe the best top six in the NHL? Are they that strong?
I think they are just because of McDavid and Draisaitl alone. And then finally getting that supporting cast, like we've seen what Kane was able to do with McDavid in a relatively small sample size last year. I don't think there's any reason to expect anything less. And then I haven't seen exactly where they're planning on slotting Holloway yet. You'd probably know that, but I know like he looked outstanding in preseason. So I think that's a huge addition too. And yeah, overall, I think just a couple guys getting a year older too. Like we're still kind of waiting to see a real breakout season from Puljujarvi and Yamamoto. So if one or both of them can really kind of have that season that or play like they've shown at times they can, then they'll be in like a significantly better group than last year.
Yeah, Holloway is slated tonight to be on the same line. And depending on when this goes out there, people will have seen the first game and we'll see how long that lasts. But he's second line tonight with Draisaitl and Zach Hyman. Mostly because Kyler Yamamoto was a question mark coming into the game and he's a little banged up. He did skate with the team, but he's not quite ready to play. So he's getting second line minutes. Puljujarvi is going to be on that top line with Connor McDavid and Evander Kane. So you wanted an opportunity for Jesse Puljujarvi. If you're a Puljujarvi fan and you're kind of like, man, this guy just needs a chance. Well, this is it. He's getting first line minutes tonight with McDavid and Kane.
Yeah. I mean, he got that last season too, right? Like it's not like this is gonna, but yeah, we'll see. I hope he does well. Like I'm a fan of Puljujarvi. He's a likable guy and everything. I just personally, for me, I haven't really seen it yet, but I mean, there is a lot of skill there. So.
Well, and he started like a house of fire last year, right? Like I think Holland said in interviews like 14 points in 12 games or something to start the season. Like he was just really, really good until he got COVID and then it kind of injured and it just sort of fell apart for him. But he started really strong. So if he's motivated and they want him to succeed and produce, it's possible that he can. But it's a question mark, right? You got Holloway and Puljujarvi in your top six based on the injuries and stuff. So it'll be interesting. What about the depth? I think when you have a third line that consists of like Ryan McLeod, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, probably Warren Fogle. That's a pretty strong third line. I mean, you go 1, 2, 3, McDavid, Draisaitl, Nugent Hopkins, and your centers. I mean, that might be the deepest pivot, roster in the NHL.
Yeah, I think, like you said, having Nugent Hopkins on that third line. And then I know there's been a lot of criticism kind of going towards Fogle. A lot of fans, especially the Puljujarvi defenders, were really wanting him shipped out of town this offseason. I think he was okay last year. I think he's a bit better than he's been given credit for. I expect him to have a better season this year. And then, yeah, I think on the fourth line and everything, like you've seen, they waived Janmark, which that tells me already they have quite a bit of depth. So yeah, no, I think overall they are a bit deeper last year up front, which is a scary thing for teams because I think as far as forwards go, they're already one of the best groups in the league last year.
Yeah, let's switch gears just a little bit. We're going to get into some of the projections of certain players on this team. Before we do that, just a quick word from our sponsor. This show is brought to you by Sports Fan Side Hustle, a new digital course that teaches passionate sports fans how to make lucrative side income off of their love of the game. Get off the sidelines and into the game with a course that will teach you more than 14 different easy to start methods for any sports fans, even ones with little to no experience in writing, podcasting, video production, collectibles, or marketing. Can use a steady part-time or full-time income. All you need is the internet, a computer, a passion for sports, and a few hours a week. Go to sportssidehustle.com to get an absolutely free startup guide that will explain 4 keys to unlocking this income opportunity. Again, that's sportssidehustle.com. All right, so let's talk a little bit about some of the players on this team. Connor McDavid, all worldly. We expect he's probably going to win the Art Ross Trophy again. How many points are we talking here? Like, can he even go farther than he did last season? I don't know what he ended up with, like 126 points or something. How high can Connor McDavid get?
That's the thing. I feel like usually when I do these, I kind of underestimate the guys. Like I was the one that a couple of years ago didn't think McDavid would hit 100 points in that COVID shortened season and all that. I think if he really wants to and is given the minutes and everything, I could see him flirting with like the 140 point mark easily. But at the same time, like you have to question again how badly they want to go for that and give him every opportunity as opposed to leaving him maybe a little bit more rested come the postseason. Like we've seen last year how good he was in the playoffs. And so it kind of depends on, I guess, what his will to do it is. I really think he's capable of pretty much anything he wants to do at this point in the regular season.
The thing I'm most interested in watching with McDavid is how big a priority he places on scoring goals. I think like the points are coming. Connor McDavid is just impossible to stop. Like you're not going to shut him down. I don't know how many games it was that he had where he didn't get a point, like maybe 1 or 2 in a row total last season. Like he just always gets you points. But if he's placing a priority on scoring this year, and he worked on his one-timer last year, and Leon Draisaitl kind of, I don't know what the word was, fluffy or whatever he said, about it. Even though he's joking, it's getting better. I mean, if he's worked on that again and he plans on shooting more and he wants to score more, and if he wants to give Austin Matthews a run for the Rocket Richard, I think he will. Like, I just absolutely think that he could get 50. I think it's in his DNA to want to, and I believe he will do it. So if you add that to the point totals, 130, 135, not at all out of the question for me. I think he can absolutely do it. And he also knows that he's got to take another step. And it seems crazy to think that he would have to do that, but if the Oilers want to win and get through that Western Conference Final, like we talked about, he's going to need to lead them there. And I think he'll do that. What about Draisaitl? Do you think he's got a shot at winning the Rocket Richard? Like, could he lead the league in goals this season? Matthews is pretty unreal. Can Draisaitl give him a run for his money?
The one reason I think he can, because I think Matthews is, I think everyone would agree at this point, is the best goal scorer in the league. Like what he's done the past 2 seasons is just incredible. But I do think like he has struggled at times to stay healthy, like play a full schedule out. And Draisaitl is kind of the exact opposite. He really never misses time. So I think that's kind of the one thing on his side of it. Like he had 55 last year and 110 points, which compared to a few of the past seasons is actually a little bit of a down year points per game wise for him. So I do think he could get right around that 60 mark, which I mean, that's got to be close to what Matthews puts up. I know he had 60 and I think 71 last year. So I think he'll be right in the running. That said, if I was placing bets on it, I would still pick Matthews, but I think Draisaitl is the one guy in the league that can kind of keep competitive with him at this point.
Well, and you have to consider too, everybody on this team knows just give the puck to Draisaitl. Like that's kind of one of the offensive game plans, especially on the power play. And he is not shy about firing that thing off. So he will shoot it. on a regular basis. They will look for him on a regular basis, and they already do. But I think McDavid takes a step. Draisaitl gets the puck more often. People will just consistently look for him to score, and he scores from crazy spots. Like he just is absolutely 100% confident that he could score from anywhere. And when you talk about a guy who's injury free, he isn't injury free. He just plays on it, right? Like he played in the playoffs last year with what most people would have been like any other sport. They're out. Like they're not even thinking about playing. Draisaitl battled through it and got an ungodly amount of points. Like it's just, he's that willing and that able. He's a big dude, right? Like he's kind of a truck that's hard to get off, and he protects the puck really well. I think.
Sorry, I was just going to say it's kind of that style he plays too, right? Where a guy like him with that injury, it's not quite as impactful because he really kind of slows things down and is able to just dominate without really moving around a whole lot. Because like you said, he is so strong on the puck. So yeah, I'm excited to see what he does this season.
Yeah, I'm going to go out on a limb. I'm going to say he actually beats Austin Matthews in the goal scoring department. I know that's a bold prediction, but I'm going for it. I'm all in. It's early in the season. I got to be super positive, right?
You think he gets 60?
Yeah, I think Matthews gets it too. Yeah. I think they both do, and I think Draisaitl is probably around the 62, 63 mark. I think it'll be super close. In fact, I think it'll probably be like down to the wire. Again, with a big asterisk of health, right? If you said Austin Matthews, if he stays healthy and Draisaitl stays healthy, if one of them's out for a while, obviously the game changes. But who do you think outside of Draisaitl and McDavid, because people outside of Edmonton always look at this team and go, oh, it's the two guys. That's all they ever do. Is it obvious to say that it's Evander Kane, or is there another person on this team that you're looking at going, no, this is the third, like this is our secret weapon, not a secret in Edmonton, but a secret everywhere else that it will really step up and kind of really produce for the Oilers this year?
As far as top production, I think Kane is like the guy that will be right below those two, again, assuming that he's healthy. But I think one guy that didn't really get a ton of credit outside of Edmonton for how good he was last season was Zach Hyman. And like you see I've read some things lately that there's kind of, at least analytics wise, that he's in for maybe a bit of a drop off production wise. And I just don't really see that. I think he's just a hound on pucks. Like we've seen it last year. He can score goals in so many different ways. He's just relentless and is good in any position he's put in, like whatever line he's on. He just always seemed to produce. He did it in the regular season. He did it in the playoffs. So I think he's a guy that will kind of flirt with that 30 goal mark again this season and doesn't seem to get a lot of credit outside of Edmonton right now.
Yeah, I was asked on an earlier show what I thought Hyman would do, if I thought he'd get the same or a little lower, a little higher. I think he's going to be right around the same mark. I mean, I guess it's preseason, so we have to be judging that with, a little bit of skepticism, but he was probably the most consistent player for the Oilers in all situations. Shorthanded, he scored a couple. On the power play, he scored one. 5-on-5, he looked dangerous as always. Like the guy just never looks like he's stopping for any reason whatsoever. And I think when you have that mentality and you're pushing that hard, just good things happen, right? And you've got skill around. Like there was one goal, he just stood there and McDavid just put it off of him, right? If you're going to be in those positions, you're going to score. Like that's just the reality of it. So even if you're not doing everything, just be where you're supposed to be and McDavid will throw it off of you. Like that's good for him. I think Evander Kane has a good year too. I don't imagine he keeps up the pace that he had at the end of the season. I think that was a pretty unreal pace, and I'm not sure that you can sustain it for a whole year, but we'll see. Is there a dark horse on this team? Is there somebody that you're looking at that you think would be, not much is expected of them, but it probably will exceed expectations?
I mean, I don't know if it's fair to say not much is well, actually, no, I was going to say Dylan Holloway, but I'll change my answer. I think Ryan McLeod last year, based off what he was able to do, there really wasn't much offense in his game, at least on the stat sheet. But I think anyone that watched the team closely seen, like, he's a crafty player. He's got good speed, skill, good at both ends of the ice. So I think he's a guy, especially depending kind of where he slots in for the majority of the season. But I think if he's in that third line role, he could put up quite a few more points than what people are thinking. And I think he showed during his time in the AHL and even in the during junior hockey in the OHL that he can put the puck in the back of the net and put up points too. So I think he's a guy that could put up more than people are expecting this season.
Yeah, I'm a huge advocate for Ryan McLeod. Anybody listening to the show last year knows that I was a big supporter of his. But for me, I'm really looking forward to the season that Ryan Nugent-Hopkins has. I think he's a crafty player, like you talked about McLeod. He's smart. He's a good two-way hockey player. Kills a lot of penalties. Will play on the power play and really run that wall sometimes. But his numbers, 5-on-5 were just not good last year. And I don't imagine that happens again. I can't see how a player with that much skill and that much talent and that much hockey IQ continues to have that trend happen to him over and over again. So I believe that he'll have a bounce back season and a much stronger campaign production wise. And by association, I think that means Warren Fogle has a good year too. Because if those two are on the same line and Nugent Hopkins picks it up, I think Warren Fogle, I don't think he was bad last year. I think he gave you exactly what you thought he was probably going to give you when you traded for him. But I saw some stuff in preseason before he went down with a little bit of an injury that I really liked. I thought he was really quick and aggressive and got in there and was grinding hard. And I think that's a good sign. So I think Warren Fogle is going to be somebody that I'm looking forward to as well. What about the blue line? You mentioned Evan Bouchard. What about like Darnell Nurse? What kind of a season are you expecting from him? He's on this huge contract, so he's got to live up to it now.
Yeah. It's got to be a good one for his sake, because there's already a lot. He's such a polarizing guy. Like he was for a lot of seasons, and now with this new deal, like it seems like some of the fan base loves him, and the other ones are already all over him, and the season hasn't started yet. Like he's going to be under a microscope all year. Like that first mistake he makes or anything is going to be just talked about nonstop. So I think he's a guy that doesn't really concern himself too much with the outside noise, which is a good thing. Like plays with a lot of confidence. So I do think he'll handle himself pretty well this season. I don't love the contract, but I think he is a better defenseman than you kind of see online and everything that he gets talked about because of that deal. So I think he'll be pretty good this season. Like they need him to be in that number one role, obviously. Once he was down in the playoffs, like their blue line was pretty exposed. As far as other guys, I was kind of excited to see the impact that Broberg might have this year, but obviously it's kind of, we don't really know what's going on there. So I don't know. I'm excited to see what Bouchard will do. I think he should easily put up north of 50 points and maybe even 60 if he spends the whole season on that top power play.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think he's going to get a lot of points too. Darnell Nurse for me is a very interesting situation. The contract is what it is. It was bad timing. They bridged him twice. They walked themselves into the situation. It's just, that was the market at the time. I don't know necessarily how much Darnell Nurse was affected all year last year by that injury. Like he was battling through some stuff in the playoffs. So you're like, really? He played on that? He played with that? Like how long was that bugging him? If that was bugging him all of the regular season, we have to give a little bit of, leeway to a guy that was fighting through that. No wonder he wasn't as good. And then you got to remember the year before that, he was incredible, right? Like he was just really good. And that was when it was elevated to the point where, yeah, Darnell Nurse is a number one. And we're talking about him in that light. And then all of a sudden he has last year where it's not as good and he's struggling a little bit. He's playing a ton of minutes, but it's not going always his way. But I don't know if that injury was a big part of that question. I think you got to give a little bit of a rope here and say, okay, he's got some flexibility with me as I'm watching this to see how he does. If he's healthy and he's ready to go, I believe we're going to see more of the earlier than the latter, that he's probably going to be a much more steady force and somebody we can rely on. I'm curious about Tyson Barrie. I saw some preseason games where he was kind of still running that power play. So I don't know where the mix is between Evan Bouchard and Tyson Barrie, but Tyson Barrie, even in the minutes that he played, was really effective. I think he got 2 goals in preseason, both that were really quite nice. So Barry's still a useful guy, and I'm very curious to see how that goes. It's going to be fun. We talked a little bit about the goaltending. What is your expectation more specifically when it comes to Jack Campbell? Like, is he going to be everything the Oilers are hoping that he will be and fans have been waiting for forever? Or do you think we see what Maple Leafs fans always say is, oh, he's not as good as people expect that he will be? Where does he sit?
I feel like a lot of that not as good from Maple Leafs fans is since he's left Toronto. It seemed like the narrative changed, but I am a little skeptical of Campbell. I think like you seen last season, the first half of the season, he was all-star caliber, and then second half really fell off. I know he dealt with some injuries too. But as far as what Oilers fans have been like waiting for, I seen a prediction yesterday. I think it was Anthony Stuart that had him as his Vezina winner. I don't see him playing up to that level. But I think, again, like he'll give them a chance to win night in and night out. And that's pretty much all this team needs. As long as he's stopping the pucks that he's supposed to, then he's doing his job, because McDavid, Draisaitl, like they'll put up offense in bunches. So, and as far as kind of starts and everything, I think I see about a 50-30 split with him and Skinner. So I feel like it's in a lot better position than it was a year ago.
Yeah. And I think Campbell, you're right. When people leave Toronto, the tendency is to trash them. And because they're the center of the hockey universe, it's a voice that's very loud, right? People hear that message from all around hockey world. And so That's the story around Jack Campbell, that he's the best teammate on the planet, that everybody loves the guy, that he's super nice to, but he wasn't as good and he didn't necessarily deserve to stick around. And people, I don't see it, but people are actually saying that Toronto's goaltending has improved. I don't see that. Like, it's just crazy to me, but it's an interesting statement. All right. Before we go here and we close things off, we tend to do this. So let's do it tonight. Now, as people see this, they're going to realize we were right or wrong as they watch this, because the game will be over already. But it's opening night, Oilers versus the Vancouver Canucks. Oilers have like the first 9 of 12 at home. Like, it's a crazy schedule to open this season, which is great for them because they were really good at home last year. What do you predict for the game against Vancouver tonight?
Vancouver's an interesting team for me. Like, when I was looking at each division and kind of where I think teams will place, they were a lot better when Boudreau was under them or got hired last year. So I think they are going to be better than some teams expect them to be. I think they'll kind of be a borderline playoff team by the end of the year. As far as tonight goes, I think the Oilers, just being on home ice and having the crowd behind them, I think they're going to come out flying. So I think tonight I'll give them I'll say 5-1 win. But I do think the Canucks will be a better team overall this season than a lot of people are giving them credit for.
Yeah, I think the Canucks are offensively gifted enough to get a couple goals. The blue line, obviously a question in Edmonton. So will they shut them out? No, not when you got guys like JT Miller, Bo Horvat, Elias Pettersson. You got some skill on that team. They're going to score, especially if the Oilers get penalties, which when they played Vancouver last time, I think they had 10 penalties in that game. Like, it was an obscene amount of penalties. If you're giving opportunities like that to Vancouver, they're going to put a couple in there. So I'm going to go 5-2. I was very close to you when I had thought this through. I think the Oilers are super jazzed up. I don't always love the opening night ceremonies because they take forever and that cools a team off, really, whatever. So hopefully the Oilers can keep that, that jazz and that they're just super lit up to get going, because if they have a hot start, it could open the floodgates and they could score in rapid succession. So I'm going 5-2. I think the Oilers win opening night. And in fact, I think they have a good start because I think they know how important it is, because last year they went on that run of where they were like, I don't know how many games it was, 2-11 or something like that. They were just terrible for a little while, and it was very important they got off to a good start. So I think they know it, and I think they realize how important it is to take advantage of this. So I think we see that, but I'm going 5-2 for Vancouver. Any final thoughts before we say goodbye?
No, I'm just excited. I think it'll be a bit more once we kind of see this first week here and how it plays out. So when we talk next week, there will be a bit more, but no, I'm just excited to get the season underway.
Yeah, no, it'll be good. I'm looking forward to watching it. I'm looking forward to keeping up with everything else. Fantasy drafts are ready to go. I've got all my picks in. I got a lot of, I've gone very, very homerish today. I got a ton of Oilers on my fantasy draft team. So let's hope they pull through. Anyway, Colton, thank you. I appreciate this very much. For everybody else that's watching this, welcome back to Oilers Overtime. We're going to be doing this regularly every week, and we're looking forward to the season. I hope that you guys are too. Go Oilers, but good sportsmanship to everybody else too. Thank you guys. Take care. And for all of our hockey fans out there, we'll see you next time.